In a galaxy where humans are seen as weak and disposable, one man defies an empire not with weapons, but with unshakable will. When Joran Vale wins an alien tournament meant to harvest his DNA, he's offered the honor of breeding for a dying royal bloodline. But instead of obedience, he tears the contract in half and sparks a rebellion that could change the future of two worlds. This is not just a fight for survival, it's a fight for freedom, dignity, and the unstoppable spirit of humanity. If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move toward this wonderful story. The crowd in the arena roared, a mixture of metallic screeches, guttural chants, and rumbling laughter. Thousands of alien spectators leaned forward, watching the final round of the trials of genetic valor. In the center of the ring, under the harsh lights of the Helian sky, stood Joran Vale, a human, sweat-covered and bruised, breathing hard, as he squared off against the final opponent. His dark hair was matted to his forehead, and a thin trail of blood ran from the corner of his lip. He had no armor, no backup, just his fists and the desperate will to survive. Across from him towered Makar, a beast of muscle and rage, with 2 sets of arms and skin like volcanic rock. His eyes glowed red, and his growl echoed through the arena. "You're smaller than my last meal," Makar snarled in a voice that cracked like thunder. Joran didn't reply. He knew better than to waste energy on talk. He had made it through every round of the tournament by thinking fast, moving faster, and hitting where it hurt. He wasn't the strongest. He wasn't the biggest. But he was human, and that had to count for something. As Makar lunged forward, swinging all 4 arms in a blur, Joran dropped low and rolled to the side. One of the strikes missed his head by inches, slicing the air with a loud crack. He pivoted, planted his foot, and kicked Makar's back leg with all his strength. The creature stumbled just slightly, but it was enough. Joran sprang up, launched himself onto Makar's shoulders, and landed a sharp elbow to the back of the monster's skull. Makar roared in fury, but Joran had already leapt away. The crowd fell into a stunned silence. No human had ever made it this far, let alone held their own against a Nargal warrior in the final match. Joran could feel every eye in the arena locked on him. He circled Makar again, breathing hard, sweat pouring down his neck. He knew he only had one good shot left in him. When Makar charged again, Joran didn't dodge. He moved forward, ducking under a swinging fist and ramming his shoulder into Makar's torso. It was like hitting a wall, but he didn't stop. He jabbed 3 quick punches into the creature's ribs, then grabbed a fallen spear from the arena floor. With a yell, he swung the blunt end up into Makar's chin. The alien staggered. Joran didn't wait. He drove the spear into the ground and used it to vault over his opponent, twisting midair and landing behind him. Before Makar could turn, Joran grabbed a ceremonial blade from the weapon rack and pressed it against the back of Makar's thick neck. A single drop of purple blood dripped onto the sand. "I yield," Makar growled, his voice low with frustration and pain. The silence broke into thunderous cheers, some shocked, others excited, all wild. Joran stepped back, panting, his arms raised in victory. He had done it. He had beaten the odds, survived the impossible, and won the trials of genetic valor. Officials rushed onto the field. A banner unfurled from the highest tower, bearing the symbol of the Helian Empire. Joran's name echoed through the arena in a dozen alien tongues. Later that night, freshly cleaned and dressed in fine white robes, Joran stood in a massive crystal chamber at the heart of the royal palace. Alien nobles and dignitaries gathered in silence as he was announced. Champion of the trials, Joran Vale of Earth. He walked slowly down the crystal floor, his eyes scanning the strange glowing walls and alien faces. At the far end, seated on a throne of light and glass, sat Queen Zarentha. She was unlike any alien he had seen. Humanoid, but clearly not human. Her skin shimmered like bronze under moonlight, and her eyes were a pale blue, almost silver. Her expression was calm, cold, and unreadable. She watched Joran approach like a scientist studying a rare insect. "You surprised us," she said in a melodic, clipped voice. "No one expected a human to win, especially not you. Glad to keep things interesting." Joran replied carefully. Zarentha stood, her silken robes trailing behind her. She circled him slowly, fingers brushing his shoulder. You have proven yourself worthy. Therefore, you will join the royal lineage. Before Joran could respond, an attendant approached with a scroll tied in gold ribbon. It was handed to him, reverently. What is this? Joran asked. The reproductive contract, Zarentha replied. Your genetic material will help restore the Helion race. You will be cared for, housed here in the palace. Your DNA will be extracted under the supervision of our scientists. Joran stared at her, stunned. You want my DNA? Zarentha smiled faintly. Only the best are chosen. It is an honor. Joran opened the scroll. His name was there, already printed. There was no space for questions, no room for refusal. His hands clenched around the paper. This was no reward. It was a sentence, and deep. In his gut, Joran knew his fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. Joran Vale sat alone in a room that looked like paradise but felt like a cage. The walls shimmered with soft blue light, and the floor was so polished it reflected the ceiling. Outside the massive window, the capital city of the Helion Empire stretched across the horizon. Towers of crystal and steel bathed in violet light from the twin moons above. The room had everything a person could want: food, luxury, peace. But what it didn't have was freedom. Joran had won a tournament that most didn't survive. He'd fought with everything he had, thinking he'd earned respect, maybe even a way home. Instead, he was now a genetic trophy. Every morning, Helion scientists in white robes entered without a word. They scanned him, poked him, sometimes took blood or other samples, then left again. They didn't speak unless it was to give instructions. They treated him not like a guest or even a prisoner, but like a tool, a source of material. His opinion didn't matter. His voice meant nothing. The contract he had been given, the one Zarentha called an honor, had no space for his thoughts. He was to stay in the palace's lineage wing, give samples as ordered, and follow rules. He had signed it in front of a room full of guards and strangers, too shocked to resist, too surrounded to escape. That moment haunted him. One day, while pacing the edge of his suite for the 100th time, a soft chime rang. The door slid open and in walked Zarentha herself. Alone. No guards, no fanfare. Her silver blue eyes scanned the room before landing on Joran. She wore a flowing robe, simple but elegant, her posture calm as always. Your health appears stable, she said. Glad to be of use, Joran replied, crossing his arms. Zarentha tilted her head. You seem unhappy. You think? He snapped. You've locked me in here like I'm a lab rat. I'm treated like a breeding machine, not a person. You agreed, she reminded him, her voice cool. I didn't know what I was agreeing to, he shot back. I was surrounded, exhausted, confused. You didn't tell me what the contract meant until it was too late. Zarentha stepped forward slowly. We do not lie. You were given the honor of contributing to our survival. That is no small thing. I'm not a donor, Joran said, his tone sharp. I'm a man. A person. On Earth, we have a word for this. Enslavement. Her eyes narrowed, just slightly. You misunderstand. Your role is essential. Our genetic line is collapsing. Our people are dying out. You can help. But you never asked me if I wanted to, Joran said quietly. You never gave me a choice. Zarentha didn't reply at first. She turned away, walking to the large window, her hands clasped behind her back. Our survival comes first. Emotions are secondary. Maybe that's your problem, Joran murmured. That made her look back, a flicker of something passing across her face. Confusion, maybe even curiosity. Explain. You think strength is just physical? Joran said. You think surviving means stripping away everything that makes you feel. But that's not survival. That's just existing. Zarentha studied him. Your words are strange to us, but intriguing. Later that night, after she left, Joran sat at the small desk in the corner of his suite, staring at the contract. He had read it 100 times. There were no escape clauses, no mercy built in. It wasn't just about giving DNA, it was about control. They owned him now. At least that's what they thought. The next day, something unexpected happened. One of the Helian officials who usually escorted the scientists entered alone. He was younger than the others, and unlike most Helians, he looked nervous. "My name is Tiro," he said in a low voice. "I serve on the Queen's Advisory Council." Joran raised an eyebrow. "And you're here why?" "To tell you the truth," Tiro said. "About why you were chosen." Joran frowned. "Because I won a tournament?" Tiro shook his head. "No. You were selected before that. The trials were just a way to make it public. You were studied for months, your military record, your survival instincts, your emotional responses. Queen Zarentha wanted someone different." Joran's jaw tightened. "So this was a setup?" "In a way, yes," Tiro said. "But not. Everyone agrees with the Queen. Some of us believe cooperation is better than control. That your kind can help us, if treated with dignity." "Then why are you telling me this?" Joran asked. "Because things are changing," Tiro whispered. "There are those who see what's happening and want to stop it, and you might be the only one who can push the Queen to change." He slipped something into Joran's hand, a small, smooth disc. "This may help when the time comes." And with that, he was gone. That evening, as the scientists arrived again for collection, Joran didn't fight. He didn't argue. But his mind was racing. He looked at the scroll again. Then at the disc Tiro had given him. Something had shifted. Queen Zarentha thought she had won, that he had no power left. But Joran Vale was done being silent, and the next time she came, he would show her exactly what that meant. The soft hum of machines filled the sterile lab where Joran Vale lay strapped to a cold metal table. Bright lights buzzed overhead, and the sharp scent of antiseptic clung to the air. His wrists and ankles were tightly bound, and a monitor blinked beside him, tracking every breath. The door hissed open, and a pale Helian scientist stepped in, his long fingers dancing across a floating display. "Procedure begins tomorrow," he said without emotion. "This will be less comfortable than before." Joran didn't answer. He had heard enough. For days he had been poked and drained, treated like an object instead of a man. But today was different. Today, he had a plan. When the lights dimmed for the night cycle and the lab fell silent, Joran turned his head slightly and looked at the small silver disc hidden beneath the padding of his restraint. Tiro had risked everything to bring it to him, an override key, a crack in the Helian armor. Joran waited until the security camera flickered. He pressed the disc to the control panel on the side of the table. A spark, then a soft click. The restraint snapped open. He moved fast. His muscles ached, but adrenaline gave him fuel. He slipped off the table, crept to the nearest supply closet, and grabbed a technician's uniform. It was tight in some places, loose in others, but it would do. He found a small stun weapon, tucked it into his belt, and made his way into the hall. Red warning lights began to flash as an alarm echoed through the corridors. Something was wrong, worse than his escape. Joran ducked into a shadowed alcove as 2 guards ran past. One shouted, "The palace is under attack. The Lineborn are here." Joran's heart pounded. The Lineborn. He had heard whispers in the lab. A radical faction of Helians who believed in pure bloodlines. They saw outside DNA as pollution. If they were here, it meant chaos. He could escape. He could run now and never look back. But he hesitated. Somewhere in that palace was Queen Zarentha, the one who had taken his freedom, the one who had called him a gift and treated him like property, but also the one who, in her own strange way, had started to listen. He took off running, not toward the exit, but deeper into the palace. The throne chamber was a scene of destruction. Smoke curled from broken columns. The walls were scorched and bodies of guards lay scattered. At the far end, Zarentha stood with a glowing staff in her hands, facing off against a squad of line-borne soldiers. She moved with precision, holding her own, but she was outnumbered. One of the soldiers raised a weapon aiming for her heart. "Hey!" Joran shouted, stepping into the chamber and firing his stun gun. The blast hit the soldier square in the chest, sending him to the floor. Blound. Others turned. Zarentha stared, stunned. "You?" she breathed. "Not exactly the rescue you expected, huh?" He said, charging forward. They fought side by side, back to back. Joran's movements were quick, sharp. He fought like he had in the tournament, except this time, it was real. Zarentha's strikes were fluid and deadly, her staff a blur of light. Together they forced the remaining attackers back. When the last one fell, the silence felt heavy. Zarentha looked at him. "You could have escaped." "I was going to," he said, wiping blood from his face. "But then I realized something. I want answers. And maybe I'm not the kind of man who runs when there's a fight worth staying for." They didn't waste time. The palace was still under siege. Zarentha led him to a hidden chamber behind the throne, where a secret passage waited. They slipped into the dark corridor as more explosions rocked the building. Lights flickered above them as they moved deeper underground. These tunnels were built during the Helian Civil Wars, she explained. They connect to different parts of the city, including a private hangar. Joran nodded. "That's our way out." As they ran, he glanced at her. She wasn't the cold queen he had first met, not entirely. There was something raw in her eyes now, something almost human. They reached the hangar, a quiet place untouched by the chaos above. A sleek scout ship waited on the launch pad. "That one," Joran said, pointing. "Fast, small, easy to fly." Before they could board, the hangar doors opened with a loud hiss. A group of line-borne troops marched in, weapons raised. "We have to draw them away," Zarentha said, eyeing the control panel. "I can trigger a decoy launch from the royal cruiser." "Do it," Joran said. "I'll cover you." She sprinted to the panel as he opened fire, forcing the soldiers to duck. Moments later, the larger ship roared to life, its lights blinking wildly. The soldiers turned, confused. That was all they needed. Zarentha ran back to him. Together they jumped into the scout ship. "Can you fly this thing?" Joran asked, strapping in. "Of course," she replied, fingers already moving across the controls. The ship lifted off just as plasma blasts flew overhead. It spun sharply, slipping through the hangar doors into the sky. Below them, the palace burned. Smoke rose in long black trails and the city beyond it glowed red. "They'll come after us," she warned. "Let them," Joran replied, staring out into the stars. "Let them see what happens when you push a human too far." The storm was far from over, but now they were flying straight through it, together. The scout ship glided low over the mountains, its damaged stabilizer humming unevenly with each jolt of turbulence. Inside, Joran Vale sat beside Queen Zarentha in the narrow cockpit, both of them silent and alert. Their escape from the palace had been close, too close, but they weren't safe yet. The line-borne rebels were still out there, hunting them through the skies of Helion. Joran watched the navigation screen flicker as Zarentha guided the ship toward a narrow valley, nestled deep between two snowy peaks. "We'll land here," she said quietly. "There's an old emergency outpost hidden below the trees. We can regroup and make repairs." The landing was rough. Sparks flew from the underside of the ship as it skidded across frozen ground, finally settling with a hard thud near a frozen lake. Joran unclipped his harness, checked Zarentha for injuries, and helped her out of the cockpit. The cold hit him immediately. Thin air, sharp wind, but it was a welcome change from the heat of the burning capital they had fled. They worked together to drag supplies from the ship and started a fire using an emergency igniter. For the first time in days, there was no shouting, no alarms, no weapons raised. Just the crackle of flames and the slow breath of two people who had barely escaped with their lives. Zarentha sat close to the fire, rubbing her hands together. Her once perfect robes were torn and streaked with ash, her hair no longer neatly braided but loose around her face. She looked tired but somehow softer, less like a queen and more like someone trying to find her place in a world she no longer fully controlled. Joran sat across from her, chewing on a nutrient bar, his expression thoughtful. "You didn't have to save me," she said after a long pause. "I didn't do it for you," Joran replied. "I did it because I believe in doing the right thing, even when it's not easy." Zarentha looked into the fire, her silver blue eyes reflecting the light. "When I created the genetic program, I thought I was saving my people. But maybe I was just trying to control what I didn't understand. We've been trying to perfect ourselves for so long that we forgot what made us strong in the first place." Joran nodded. "You tried to build survival by removing choice, emotion, and unpredictability. But sometimes those messy things are what actually keep us alive." They spent the night in the valley, taking turns keeping watch. When dawn came, golden and cold, they got to work repairing the scout ship. The stabilizer was still failing and the communication system was damaged, but they had just enough parts to make it fly again. Barely. It took them the whole day, working side by side in silence and understanding. By nightfall, the ship was ready to go. Their destination, a secret research facility known only to Zarentha, one that had been quietly working on ethical genetic solutions. The facility was hidden beneath a waterfall at the edge of the northern cliffs. When they arrived, its defense systems scanned them, then let them through. Inside, scientists in simple uniforms greeted them with wide eyes and deep bows. "Your Majesty," one said, "we thought you were lost." "Not yet," Zarentha replied. "But we don't have much time." They were taken to a private meeting room where Joran met Dr. Kale, the lead researcher. The doctor was calm, kind-eyed, and clearly surprised to see a human standing beside the queen. Zarentha explained everything, what had happened in the capital, the rebellion, and how Joran had risked everything to help her. She also explained the truth about her condition. "The royal bloodline has nearly failed," she admitted. "I cannot bear children. That's why I pushed so hard for the program. But I realize now, I went too far." Dr. Kyle looked between them and smiled gently. "There may still be another way." Over the following weeks, the rebellion was fought not only on the battlefield, but in the hearts of the Helion people. When news of Zarentha's survival and her stand against the extremists reached the outer cities, many began to resist the Lineborn. Loyal forces rallied. With Joran's help, the resistance gained strategy, courage, and a voice that spoke of choice and unity, not control and purity. Slowly, the tide began to turn. 3 months later, the capital was retaken. The Lineborn leaders were captured, and the old system of forced genetic selection was dismantled. Zarentha held a speech in front of her people, standing beside Joran, and declared the end of the reproductive contract program. "From this day forward," she said, "our future will be chosen, not forced. We will survive not through domination, but through respect and cooperation." Later that evening, in the quiet of the palace garden, Dr. Kale approached them with a small device in hand. "The test results are in," he said, smiling. "There's something you should see." He handed the device to Zarentha. Her hands trembled slightly as she read the data. Then her eyes filled with tears, clear, shimmering tears that slowly hardened into tiny crystals as they fell. "I'm pregnant," she whispered. "Naturally. No procedure. No extraction." Joran stepped closer, stunned. "How is that possible?" Dr. Kale answered gently. "Your DNA wasn't just compatible. It created something new. A perfect balance." They held each other in silence, overwhelmed. This child, this new life, wasn't the result of a contract or an order. It was a choice, a connection, a symbol of everything they had fought for. When the time came, the baby was born healthy, strong, and full of life. They named him Elian, a word from both their languages meaning born of peace. And as Joran stood beside Zarentha, watching their son sleep beneath the stars of two worlds, he knew something for certain. Hope was not written in blood or bound by law. It was forged in fire, tested in storm, and born in the quiet space between enemies who chose to become something. More together, they had not only survived, they had changed the stars.